So hey, I'm Jeff. I'm in New Jersey today, which is a good place, believe it or not, despite what television would lead you to believe. And it's good for me because it's home, and I'm not here that often. I'm excited to talk to you today about something that I've been very passionate about for the last, certainly for the last 5 years or so, and it's this concept of lean UX. It's not clear to me exactly who everybody is in the room or kind of what the level of knowledge is around UX and design and software development and so forth. And so I'll kind of briefly touch on maybe some high-level stuff just to get that out of the way before digging in. But my background has been, I spent the last 17 years or so, roughly, in software development and design. Started off doing a bunch of kind of simple, you know, when the web was easy and simple, we did more simple work, and then moving into more interactive work and user experience design, and then most recently, product management, product strategy, and process. Because the interesting thing is that the nature of software development has fundamentally shifted in the last 5 years. Really, the last 5 years have been really transformational to the way that software products are made, and the change that's happened in the last 5 years is the opportunity for continuous deployment. Right, the software has become a continuous process. I used to work at a company called AOL, used to be called America Online before that. And we used to send discs to the UK, so you guys probably got some of those discs in the mail back in the day. And I'm sorry about that. I was partially responsible, at least for the software that was on those discs. And look, back then, you know, that was how you consumed software, right? You consume them on, I actually have one on my desk. It's a CD-ROM, believe it or not. Actually, I think it's a DVD. I don't think it's a CD-ROM, but it's data nevertheless. And that's how we consumed software. It was a static thing that you made and then you sold in a physical store. People went to, you know, you bought a box of software, or I sent you a disc in the mail, and then you put that disc. You'd have to go buy it and then put that disc into your computer and install it, and then as the people who made that software, we would then have to wait for you to do all of that. Come and then talk to you after you did that to get a sense of what worked well, what didn't work well, what you liked, what solved real problems for you, what didn't solve real problems for you. And that feedback loop was lengthy. 6 months, you know, we put a disc out every 6 months, and there's a 6-month feedback loop. So you're looking at 12-month cycles before you're making any kind of meaningful updates to the products and services that you're shipping. And that was really the case even when we moved to the web, like the open web. That was still really the case, and that mentality certainly has carried through organizations that are still thinking about kind of these big releases, 6-month releases, 12-month releases, 18-month cycles. In the last 5 years, the world of DevOps has emerged. DevOps being development and operations, two previously siloed engineering organizations, right? You've got the people who make the software and the people who deploy the software. And we've brought them together to be this one group of people who make and deploy software. And what that's done is, again, it's fundamentally changed the nature of software from something static that we buy in a store to a continuous process of optimization and iteration. And that, believe it or not, that changes everything. It changes the way that we think about software product development. It changes the way that we think about how we go about even conceiving products and services that we want to deliver to the people, and how we want to get the people that we are working with, the people that we're teaching, to think about product. Right? There's this perception, and I think that, you know, there's still you know, certainly a lot of use cases in hardware that maintain that perception. Right? You've got sort of like the annual release cycle for these things, and you make it feel like, oh, well, we get one of these a year, right? But with software, you can get an idea out into market as fast as you want. I mean, really, the bottom line is it's as fast as you or the organizations that you work in or the people that you're teaching work in want. The capabilities are becoming extremely low cost, and they can be bought as a service. In other words, like you can buy Amazon Web Services or other hosting providers or platforms that allow you to push code into your customers' hands very quickly. Just to put a fine point on what I'm talking about, at the extreme end of this, you've got Amazon. Amazon is a pioneering organization when it comes to continuous improvement and continuous deployment. They also provide the services for this, not surprisingly. They push code, live code to production every 11.6 seconds. So Amazon pushes bits, real bits, out to real customers every 11.6 seconds. Now, the thing to take away here, besides the fact that that's an amazing statistic, and really no other organization works at that pace, is that the amount of stuff that they are shipping is tiny. Right? These aren't huge redesigns of the checkout process or the product page, right? They're just moving a button to the right 3 pixels, or they're tweaking a call to action, or changing the personalization algorithm, or something along those lines. And then what that's allowed them to do is to then measure the impact of that change on customer behavior. And by measuring the impact of the change on customer behavior, they can then determine whether or not that was a good idea or a bad idea. In that organization, getting the product out the door is not a measure of success. It's simply the beginning of the conversation. In that organization, changing customer behavior is the measure of success. And what that does is it does a couple of things. First of all, it brings objectivity into product development conversation. So in many companies, and certainly many of the companies that I work with, there's a lot of subjectivity in product development and design conversations, right? I'd like you to build this feature, and I'd like you to make it red, right? And well, how do you know we should build that feature? And how do you know it should be red? Well, I said so. I'm the boss. Go build it, right? That happens a lot, still to this day. Probably slightly more nuanced conversations. Maybe not. Maybe less nuanced conversations than that. But essentially, there's a lot of this deliberate approach to product development. But when you turn it, in those organizations, success is determined as I did what the boss told me. I shipped that thing and I made it red. But when you change the conversation to did we impact customer behavior in a positive way, it brings objectivity into the conversation. So, okay, so we built the thing the boss wanted, and now it's red. Terrific. Did customers buy more stuff from us? Did they finish their task faster? Did they sign up for a newsletter? Did they not have to ask for their password every time they come to the website? Did they come back more often? Did they tell their friends, right? All the things that we want our customers to do, we can measure in a digital world. And because we've got the ability, because people are consuming our products, the digital products that people make, we consume them on our devices, we consume them on the web. There's no, with the exception of, once you get the app on your phone, even the updating process of the app is automated. And certainly web-based services are automated without us knowing. And we're getting used to that continuous change and that continuous development. And by measuring the change in customer behavior that these small bits make, we can then determine, should we keep going in this direction, right? Hey, we released that small bit. What happened? Well, it seems like people are, logging in more successfully. All right, let's do more of that. And let's optimize it, and let's scale it out and try with a few more people. And then continue to grow that out. What you're doing is you're collecting evidence that says we should keep going down this particular path. And evidence is objective. Now, the other interesting thing is that if the feedback, if you measure customer behavior, and the feedback comes back that says, hey, you know what, this actually negatively impacted customer behavior. they are buying less stuff, they're taking longer to do their jobs, whatever it is, right? We can roll that back. And we can learn very quickly that that was a bad idea before we invest too heavily in doing any more. And that's the key that I want you to take away in this conversation about lean and agile and lean UX and design, is that at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to reduce the risk of building things that people don't want, of designing things that people don't want. There's so much waste in software development. There's so many projects that never ship. There's so many projects that take forever to ship. And when they do, they miss the mark. Everything that I've been working on in the last 5 years, in the last 8 years really, has been focused on building products and then ultimately teams and organizations that take these ideas to heart and say, look, we want to make sure that we're building things that customers actually want. And what I try to bake into these conversations is that as a designer, as an engineer, as a product manager, as a business line owner, as an executive, as a team, as a company, you've got to accept a certain amount of humility in the way that you do your work. And what I mean by that is the humility to explicitly admit that you cannot predict the future. Which sounds ridiculous, right? But that's what we're doing. Look, software development is complex and it's unpredictable. And when somebody says, I want you to build me an iPhone app and I want you to make it red, right? They are taking a guess, right? And if it's the boss, then you have to kind of go with that guess, but they're taking a guess. By bringing in this position of humility into the way that we design products, into the way that we build, what we choose to build, and how much we choose to build it, we acknowledge very publicly that we might be wrong. And when we acknowledge that up front, it's a lot easier to change course downstream. So when we collect that evidence that says, hey, that wasn't that great of an idea, we can roll it back and try again. And it starts to build this culture where it's safe to fail. And as if you think about this from a kind of a humble perspective, it also changes the nature of the way that we think about work. We think about, traditional software design and development was what's called a waterfall process, and I'm sure you're familiar with that term, but essentially there's a very linear process, right? We define, we design, we develop, we test, and we deploy. And that linear process leads to incremental software development. So in other words, we build for a while, and then we ship it, and then we build more stuff, and then we build more stuff. A humble point of view on software development takes an iterative approach to product development and design as opposed to incremental. Iterative, again, means we're going to put something out there. It's going to be relatively small, right? Minimally viable. And we're going to hope that is something that customers like. But if, depending on the feedback that we get based on that, we are then going to iterate on that thing. In other words, we're going to go back and continue working on it, right? Again, shipping it is the beginning of the conversation, and then we're going to iterate and optimize and scale it based on that evidence that we're collecting. And so many organizations that I've seen, so many design teams and development teams have struggled with that. It's really tough. Even for us, I used to work in an organization called the Ladders. It used to have a UK branch as well back in the day. And when I started working there, there was it was a company going from waterfall to a more agile way of working. So a shorter cycles, more iterative, and really, we struggled with that transition very, very much because it wasn't the process that was hard to accept, right? Instead of going from 9-month release cycles, we went down to 2-week release cycles. It was the mentality that said, well, we launched something, but it's not done. We have to go back and fix it. And really switching to this mindset of iterative product development was key for us. Because then it allowed everybody to put work out into customers' hands that wasn't necessarily finished. And that was a good way for them to start to realize that because of this new continuous reality, these software projects were actually never finished. We used to put in kind of these artificial deadlines that said, okay, we shipped it, we're done, let's move forward. We can continually optimize it. And so the way that we determine success these days is whether or not we've actually changed customer behavior in a positive way. Now, along the way, in thinking about things in a more more iterative capacity, if you're trying to get ideas out into markets sooner, you're going to have to change the way that designers and developers and product managers work together. In the past, it was a very siloed thing, right? We'd kind of do our design work, and we'd give it to the developers, and then give it to the testers, and then to the ops people to deploy. Today, what we're trying to do is bring everybody together and get everybody working on the same thing at the same time, and building these small cross-functional teams that participate in every aspect of the software design and development process. So at the very least, you've got product management, design, and engineering on the team working together to determine what work they should do and what success looks like. And in the process of doing so, what they end up doing is declaring their assumptions. What's fascinating to me, what you'll discover too if you start to kind of work this way, is that people bake a ton of assumptions into the work they do when it comes to digital product development, right? They make an assumption about who the customer is, and they make an assumption about what problem they're solving, and they make an assumption about what features will solve that problem, and they make an assumption about why that's important to the business or why it's important to the customer. When you build these small cross-functional teams and you put them together to work on a project, they immediately start to articulate those assumptions, whether they do it explicitly through some kind of facilitated exercise or implicitly through casual conversation. People start to realize that they are thinking about things not in the same way as their colleagues. And what that does is it introduces risk into the process, right? So I think, I'll give you a perfect example. So I worked at the Ladders. It was a job board that catered to people who made $100,000 or more in the United States. I facilitated an exercise, just one exercise, with the executive team to determine who they believe we are building products for. And we created personas. Who were we building products for? And there were 8 executives there from across the company. Between the 8 of them, they created 21 different personas. Right? These are people who sit next to each other, have been working together for 8 to 10 years, have a ton of experience in the field, and in theory are building the same product for the same person. And yet each one of them had a wildly different opinion about who the customer was and what the pain point was that we were solving. And that's a very enlightening exercise to realize that you're not on the same page. You're not on the same page. Everybody's pulling in different directions. Everybody's fighting for their own agenda, and then we build a lot of churn and waste into our process. And the products that we build are disjointed. They're not focused on a core customer base or a core problem. The design and the user experience is all over the place because somebody advocated for this feature that caters to aging executives, and somebody advocated for another feature that caters to fast rising millennials, right? And so it becomes a mishmash of priorities and experiences and designs. And so by building a small team, by sitting them together and saying, look, you guys are tackling this particular issue, our goal is for you to change this element of customer behavior, those teams can get together and articulate those assumptions to each other. Okay, terrific. Which customer do we focus on first? Let's agree to that. Okay, what's the problem that we're solving first for that customer? Let's agree to that. And then, how do we think we'll solve that? Let's agree to that. And lastly, and most importantly, what does success look like? and again, I'll say it again, I've said it a couple times already, success is not shipping the product. Success is changing customer behavior. So let's decide what we want to measure. Now, the beautiful thing about digital products and services is that once we have all of those assumptions declared, we can start to design experiments to learn whether or not those are the right things for us to work on. And the nice thing about those experiments is that they may start off as paper prototypes or clickable set of wireframes or something along those lines. They can, if you're hitting the mark, they can very quickly iterate into a real version, an initial version of the product, so that you've got something out there very quickly. And again, that continuous deployment world allows us to keep pushing that out and optimizing and improving. And every time that we do that, we start to collect data about whether we're building the right things and designing them the right way. And then coupled with that data, we want to make sure that we're talking to customers, right? So by getting ideas into market faster using the concepts of continuous deployment, we can collect quantitative data. What people are doing. They're clicking, they're signing in, they're telling their friends, they're finishing the task. And that's great, but it doesn't tell us why. Why are they being more successful or why are they being less successful? And so you've got to make sure that you build a qualitative side to this conversation so that on a regular basis, the folks that are building the product are talking to the customers that they believe are buying these products from them. And it's those face-to-face conversations, one-on-one, face-to-face conversations that really humanize the experience and the problems and the challenges, and they give you the other side, right, the motivational side of the conversation that says, okay, people are being less successful with this task. Why? Well, because we put red text on a red background, so they can't read it, right? Terrific. Let's figure out why people can't find the action buttons, and then iterate again and see if we can change that behavior. And if you can build that learning element into your product design and product development processes, then every time that you go through that loop of trying something out, seeing how it works, course correct. Every time you get some of that data back, you're nudging your efforts in a more accurate direction. And you do that again by building learning and research into your product development processes. So it's really easy. Like you talk to most organizations today, and if you ask anybody in IT or product development, what skill sets do you have, or what disciplines do you have, or practices do you use in building your digital products? They'll say software engineering, and they'll say product management. They might say business analysis, and in a decent organization, they'll say design to some extent. But very, very rarely will you hear research as part of that as well. And research is key. It's key to understanding whether or not we're doing the right things. And it's key to that position of humility. The problem that most organizations have with research is that traditionally, it's been this huge monolithic activity that happens at the beginning of an initiative or at the end. It's expensive, it requires renting out a facility, spending 2 days there, it's boring, all of those things, and it rarely generates any action that we can implement into the current release. Today, you have the capabilities, everyone on the team, not a researcher per se, although they're great for this, but designers, developers, product managers have the time and the capability to do less research more often. So take that big monolithic chunk of research and just chop it up into smaller increments that you bake into your product design and development efforts. And all of a sudden, the research effort becomes palatable because it doesn't take 2 days and $20,000. It takes a morning and $500 to get people in the room and to pay them an incentive to be there and speak with you. And if you can build a regular conversation with your customers into your software development efforts, It provides you that data that says we are headed in the right direction, or we aren't headed in the right direction, and we need to change course. Now, the fascinating thing in all of this is that the modern way to think about software development is called agile. For better or for worse, it is the most, certainly the most popular process used in most organizations that I work with when it comes to software development. It came from software engineering, and it's developed a reputation as a way to drive efficiency into software engineering teams. And over the years, there's been a lot of hostility between doing good agile and doing really great product design and research. But that's not the case anymore. The ideas behind Lean UX, the ideas behind, and certainly in the book and in all the Lean UX content that, and the presentations and the talks, certainly that I've given, that Josh Stein has given, that Janice Frazier has given, all the folks who've been talking about this for a while, leverage the benefits of agile software development to build in these loops of learning and design and development. So I actually think that agile software development works really well with all of these ideas that I just shared with you. Because what agile focuses on is taking that big chunk of work and breaking it down into small pieces, into small sprints or iterations. And those iterations could be a week, or 2 weeks, or some companies do 3 weeks, but a week or 2 weeks is usually the more common framework. And the nice thing is that you can build research, a tiny bite of research, into each one of those loops. And at the end of each one of those iterations, you come together as that small team of product, design, and engineering, and you say, okay, what did we do this past week or these past 2 weeks? Well, we built these features, and we talked to some customers, and we looked at the data from the last release. Okay, great. What does all that tell us? Well, it tells us that these 2 features are still working well. We need to iterate on those. That one seems like it's hit the mark, and these 3 things need to change. Right? It limits the risk that every team takes by breaking up the work into these small chunks. So if you do something and it completely fails, you've only spent a week or 2 weeks on it. You can go back, roll it back, and try again. And it increases the team's agility, which I think is the real point of doing anything with Agile. It's to increase the responsiveness of the team and to give the team the confidence to say, we're going to try something. We don't know that it's the right thing to do. We think it's the right thing to do. But if we're wrong, it's okay. First of all, it's okay to be wrong. And second, we'll change course if we got it wrong. And that starts to build in that iterative mentality over incrementalism. And it starts to change the culture of the companies and the teams to be much more focused on learning, humility, iteration, and putting the customer first, right? If you'll notice, the thing that I talk about, when you're out there collecting the data, it's all about the customer, how the customer is behaving, what's motivating the customer to do certain things. Are we targeting the right customer? Are we solving the right problem? All of this puts focus on the customers. And at the end of the day, if you make your customers more successful, you will make your business more successful. So understanding what motivates them, what makes them feel successful, and what solutions would achieve those goals for them is our primary concern. And everything flows from that. And the only way to do that is to take the continuous software world and use that to drive continuous learning into our teams through continuous customer conversations. Just build that into it. And that's what makes for really great product design. It makes for really great software engineering. And ultimately, it really makes for great businesses at the end of the day. So that's from my perspective, that's 25 minutes or so on that topic, and a kind of really broad look at things. And I've said a lot of things. So thoughts, feedback, questions, what's interesting to you guys?
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so any questions? Yep.
Hi, I'm a researcher stroke designer that works in Agile. and I've worked in quite a lot of agile teams, I find that I completely agree with you about research should be part of the continuous process, but you can get bad research in agile as well as good research. And I find that just as sometimes you need experts in dev or design, you need experts in research. I've seen a lot of disasters. Oh, we've spoken to the customer and they said this, because actually the research was done by people who don't know how to do research. So yeah. I'm just kind of saying, for me, and I know probably I'm a bit biased, but you know, I have seen tooltips over ghost tips over, you know, an eye for the same issue, you know, and it's kind of all in the same field on a form because someone did research and a user said, can I have a tooltip and can I have an eye icon? And can, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, I agree with you, but I think specialisms also are really important in Agile. I don't know what you think. Yeah.
Well, so let me react to two things that you said there, because I agree with what, and you can get bad design and bad coding and bad product management as much as anything else, right? That said, two things I want to react to. First, we never do what customers say, right? We you know, that's the thing that teams need to learn is that we listen to what customers tell us. We then synthesize, you know, the real need, and then the fun part is for us, the makers of digital products and services, to determine how best to solve for those needs, right? So a customer says, I need a tooltip. What they're actually saying is, I don't know how to use this, right? And right, something like that. So that needs to be, you know, and that's something that teams learn over time. Now, I wholeheartedly agree with you that research can be done very poorly and in a misleading way. And I think that researchers, like professional researchers on teams, are tremendously valuable. They're tremendously valuable in two ways. First is that they can do really good research, right? And that's terrific. And the second is that they can teach the rest of the team how to do good research, right? We're not looking to make them into expert full-time researchers. But to your point, if we take a team of 6 or a team of 8 and we deputize them with some basic research knowledge, tactics, and techniques, then all of a sudden you've made, instead of having a team of 8 with 1 researcher on it, you now have a team of 8 with 8 researchers on it. And you can collect more data faster. And the quality of that data will improve. And so I think that we can leverage the researchers on our teams to do good research and to train the rest of the team on how to do good research. You know, like anything else, having a good customer conversation is a skill that you practice, that you're not good at first, and that you get better at with time. And I think that researchers can help people get there faster. So agree with what you said. I think we can leverage our researchers to expand the power of the team to do better work.
Totally agree with you.
Sorry, I was at a similar thing with you 3 years ago at ThoughtWorks, I think it was. And I remember asking at the time, because I was struggling to get my company to adopt some form of UX, some form of Agile, and we're an agency. And the issue was my boss couldn't see how we could sell in the unknown to our clients. And I remember asking you, and you said, we've got some ideas on this, we're not really sure, but it's just try and do it, and you'll see that it works. And so 3 years on, the company is doing it now, and it's not doing full lean UX, but it's adopted UX and Agile, and it really does work to just get little bits done and show them that it that you know just a little bit of research, a little bit of humility works. So I wondered if you've got any more updates from your side 3 years on.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, really glad to hear that, and good to know that. Sorry, there's the cat's in my office and he's freaking out. I don't know what was going on, but he's losing his mind over here. No, he's under my desk. He's distracting me. So first of all, good to hear, and I'm glad you've made progress. 3 years ago, we were launching our services company as well, trying to figure out how to do this in a services environment in the same way. And my answer back then was legitimate. I don't know, we'll figure it out. In the 3 years since then, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about how to run this. And if I was to summarize kind of maybe the top 3 learnings of the last 3 years of doing lean UX and Agile in a services company, I would say customers don't want to buy experiments, so you want to sell them learning and risk mitigation. I think that language actually works well. The conversation around customer outcomes is one that has become easier to have as more and more products fail in the marketplace. And so I think that sense you can point to things and say, do you want to be that product? Do you want to be this product? Do you want to be do you want to go out there and fail, or do you want to make sure that we actually solve a real problem for your customers? And that's worked well to some extent. And then lastly, from a services perspective, you do fundamentally have to change what you sell and your business model. Traditionally, when I worked at agencies 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we sold deliverables. We sold specs and prototypes and designs. And today we sell time, period. You buy the team's time. That team is going to work on your project and is going to deliver some kind of product at the end that will hopefully achieve some outcomes. But I can't tell you exactly what those features are going to be like. And we've had more and more luck and success in selling that kind of work because of organizations are becoming more aware that it's difficult to predict exactly what shape software should take. So that's been really successful. And that's all been true except with the only exception being government work. We've tried to do government work, and they cannot procure services this way. Services that say, what are we going to get at the end of it? And you're like, I don't know.
I think that third point was the most successful for us as well. You sort of build in halfway through, reevaluate your scope, and then three quarters of the way through, reevaluate your scope as well. So you sort of, you build in the experiment thing, and it works really well.
Cool.
Thank you. That's awesome.
Thank you. Brilliant. Can we all just give a big round of applause to Jeff?